Well everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the Samsung Galaxy S6 and see how this particular phone holds up in 2024. Now, I will probably tell you for the vast majority of people out there, you should not be buying a phone like the Samsung Galaxy S6 anymore, specifically for to use on an everyday basis. For a collector's item, maybe you could kind of make the argument, but for every other person out there, I couldn't recommend this phone not enough. Basically meaning I would not recommend anyone to buy this phone. There are so many other better phones I'd recommend buying, and if you want to pick up those phones I would recommend buying, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there, and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off with the outside of the Samsung Galaxy S6, on the front side of this particular phone, you are basically getting a 5.1-inch Super AMOLED display. Now, the thing with this particular display was that it was a pretty good looking display, at the time. It was a Super AMOLED display, it was 1440p, and I think at that time, this was one of the highest resolution displays we've ever seen at that moment. I mean, that is a very, very high resolution display just to have inside of a phone like that, and that was in and of itself a super, super crazy thing going on for that particular phone. On top of that, you were getting a pretty big bezel on the top side. So, not anything super crazy going on there, but just a lot of bezel there. On the bottom, you were getting that home button with a fingerprint sensor in it, which was very nice. You're getting the capacitive buttons on the side of it as well. So that's another really big thing going on here too. And overall with the front side, I always liked the way this particular phone looked. I always thought it looked great. And even now, even the white model I had, it still looked honestly not that bad. But you can definitely tell it's looking a little bit dated compared to phones that we have nowadays. But I think when people look at this phone, much like with iPhones, they'd be like, oh, that's an older Samsung Galaxy phone, rather than being like, oh, that's a super old, outdated phone when it comes down to it. So from that side, just one of those things to keep in mind. Now, the build quality of the Samsung Galaxy S6 was probably one of the biggest assets for it, but it was also one of those things that a lot of people looked at on this phone and were kind of disappointed in. So on one hand, the sides of this phone felt so premium. This was one of the best feeling phones of that year when it first came out. And you have to keep in mind, this phone came out in 2015. So that was 9 years ago, which is crazy. But the downside of it was that Samsung removed a lot of stuff from their previous phones that they used to have. I mean, the one thing was the microSD card slot. So the Samsung Galaxy S6 did not have a microSD card slot. The predecessor, the S5, and the successor, the S7, all had microSD card slots, and this phone, unfortunately, did not have that type of capability, which, again, in and of itself, was a really big downside. If you're going through and if you're buying one of these types of phones, I mean, I will definitely tell you that's a really, really big downside in and of itself, and that was definitely something that I was not really looking forward to on this particular phone. On top of that, with the backside, you were getting a glass back on this phone, which was really cool. A single camera setup as well, which was another really cool thing. But beyond that, it was a pretty limited type of experience when it came down to it too, because you were not getting a removable battery. This was one of the key points of ever picking up a Samsung Galaxy phone, and Samsung basically removed it on this type of device, which again, made it zero sense for me. I have no idea why Samsung did this. They should have never done that at that time. There was 20 other things they could have done in between then. For them to do it at this moment was very crazy. I have no idea why they did it. I mean, they thought it would make them more money or something like that, but that was not the case at all. And that was kind of what was going on with this particular device. So personally for me, when I'm looking at a device like the Samsung Galaxy S6 on the outside, I'm still a fan of it. I still think it looks great and everything, but there were lots of reasons why this phone didn't really, it sold very well. They sold a bunch of copies or sold a bunch of, units of this phone. But the problem that they were running into was that they tried to make a super premium device, but it kind of ended up doing the exact opposite because a lot of people were not, basically happy about this device when it came down to it. So from that side, that kind of covers it up there. Now from the camera angle, you were getting a single 16 megapixel wide angle camera on the back and then a 5 megapixel wide angle camera on the front. So this was another interesting thing going on here too, because you were able to film at 4K at 30 on the back and 1440p on the front. And I will tell you, when it comes down to this camera, it's definitely not a bad camera at that time. Samsung was kind of notorious at making pretty good cameras even at this moment. They make excellent cameras now, but this was one of the things that when you were buying the Samsung Galaxy S6, you were getting a fairly good camera. Now, one of the issues that I saw with the Samsung Galaxy S6 back in the day was basically that there was times where behind the camera lenses, there could have been some dust that came up, behind the camera lens. So sometimes the camera would look grainy or something like that. That was kind of a weird thing that was going on. But beyond that, if you were getting a perfect Galaxy S6, I would say the camera quality was actually very, very decent and very comparable against something like the iPhone 6s at the time. I look at the Galaxy S6 And I still think that particular device looks very good. I still think, I mean, there's not really, again, that much to complain about here on this particular side. And I would definitely tell you, if you're looking at this camera nowadays, it's definitely going to be outdated. It's not going to look that great. The photos aren't going to look that great. Videos aren't going to look that great. And there's going to be lots and lots of problems that you're going to run into probably just using this phone this day and age. But at that time, it really wasn't that bad. And I do think, I mean, it was a pretty good camera. It was a really good feature for this phone when it first came out at that moment. So from that side, that kind of covers it up there too. Now on top of that, from the software side, this particular phone is pretty much, I mean, it's not getting any more software updates. And it hasn't gotten a single software update in like so many years now. I mean, this thing stopped at like Android like 7 or something like that, Android 8. That was a very, very long time ago. And I would hate for somebody to go ahead and buy this phone if it's already outdated. And that is exactly what's going on here. So without a doubt, if you're going to go through and buy some sort of a device, you want to avoid these phones like crazy. These ones make no sense at all to buy. Like I said, you are much better off purchasing a device that is still kind of supported with software that's still going to be there. This phone is not supported with software, and this is by far the number one reason why I would recommend avoiding these types of devices. So this in and of itself right there, just avoid buying the Samsung Galaxy S6 unless you want to keep it as a collector's item or something, but other than that, this doesn't make any sense at all to go and purchase. On top of that, you're getting the, Exynos 7420 octa chipset inside of this thing with 3 gigabytes of RAM. And I remember at that time when I was messing around with this particular device, the performance of this phone really wasn't that bad. It was a pretty decent performing device. However, the only issue that you were kind of getting with this particular phone at that moment was that, TouchWiz and Samsung Experience, these things were fairly, I don't know what else to tell you, but they weren't like the best versions of Android at the time. And definitely stock Android was giving you a much better experience. With this specific device, it really was giving you a very, I would say, lackluster experience when it came down to it. And that is kind of the problem and the issue that you're getting when you're getting these types of phones, is that you're getting a phone that is so outdated like crazy that it just doesn't make any sense to go and buy because it's already outdated. You're getting into this really weird area where it's like, okay, well, it's just the performance is not that good. Why would you even want to use this phone? The only reason I would even kind of recommend using this phone is to not use it, is to go and have it as a collector's item. Beyond that though, the performance of this phone is very, very lackluster, and the battery life of this phone was really not that good either. And it's only gotten worse throughout time. And that's why I'm saying, like, for you to go and buy this phone, it just doesn't make any sense from a performance side, from a battery side, from almost every single angle. The main reason for that is because this specific device just isn't really, there's not much going for it when it comes down to it. So what I would say is the Samsung Galaxy S6, I would just recommend avoiding this device. It just doesn't make any sense to go and buy, and I would hate for you to go and buy this device and use it if you're not going to have a good time with it. And I think we all know this one is not worth buying. As a collector's item, it might be worth it. Like if you're trying to fill up your Galaxy S6, if you're trying to buy all the Samsung Galaxies, then by all means buy it. But other than that, it doesn't make any sense to buy it, and I would recommend avoiding it like crazy. So that pretty much covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.